Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. I was going to wish you a happy new year and talk about the new year, but let's talk about Venezuela. This is really important. Venezuela, its history, what it means in the geopolitical scheme of the world, and what it means for those of us who respect international law. But first, this is Latina Literati. What do we know? In the pre-dawn hours of January 3rd, about 150 military helicopters, small and large, started to attack Caracas. We know that somewhere between 1 and 3, a Delta Force, Special Force, whatever, was able to get into the presidential residence and take President Maduro and his wife. And they bound President Maduro, his wife, and took them in these helicopters. It is said first to Puerto Rico and then on to New York. What does this mean? What do we know now? We know that there were people on the inside. In Spanish, we call them vendepatrias, people that were willing to have their own compatriots killed in order for the operation to go through. We know that dozens and dozens of innocent people were killed. We know that there were beacons placed by these vendepatrias throughout where they had to destroy or where the bombs had to go. We know that the U.S. military had a cyber operation that just cut off all of the military communications within Venezuela. We know that many people were hurt. I think the official count is 32 Cuban officers were killed. People from other nations were hurt. Unbelievably, there was this very high delegation from China. China has been the largest importer or purchaser of Venezuelan oil for over a decade because of the U.S. sanctions. And so I want to just take a side note. So I'm sure everybody knows, but unlike the North Sea or the Middle East, the oil there is called sweet oil. It's easy, it flows, it's much easier to refine and become gasoline. In the tar sands of Canada, in Venezuela, even though they're supposed to be the largest reserves, the oil is very heavy. That means it doesn't move, it's filled with impurities, it's very expensive to actually refine. And so what does this mean? Everyone is saying this is about oil, but I don't think it's about oil. I think it is about controlling the entire hemisphere, and specifically South America, because we haven't heard for transition of government, we haven't heard for release of political prisoners, we haven't heard for economic anything for the poorest of the poor that are in Venezuela. All we've heard about is oil. And now we're hearing that Venezuela has to cut all ties with China, with whom it had a very close trading relationship, with Iran, with whom it had a close security relationship. So imagine the U.S. thinks that countries all along the Soviet Union can become part of NATO, and the Soviet Union shouldn't blink, right? But Iran has a security agreement with a country in another continent, but in the same hemisphere, and all of a sudden, that leadership is untenable for security interests. So interesting. And so that's, again, we know very little, but from what I have read and what I've gotten from the different news outlets, that's a sense of what happened and how terrifying it is for everyone. It was supposedly postponed for a long time until everything was in place. In any case, bogus charges in an indictment were prepared. And as an attorney, I just want to quickly comment, there's an absolute international legal principle called sovereign immunity. What does that mean? It means you can't prosecute a sitting president. Imagine the chaos it would cause if every time someone didn't, or someone wanted to accuse a sitting leader of something, they could simply do that. It just is not in conformance with the peace and stability of nations that we all should want. Number one. Number two, no evidence was given of any of the charges, and there's no indication that any of them will stand. So I have no clue as to what the federal judge in New York will do, but my gut tells me that these allegations will be like a house of cards falling in on themselves. You can't make things up, and this administration is known for making things up. Lying to the courts, disrespecting Congress because it didn't even tell Congress about this. It still hasn't given Congress information it needs. So there is no balance of power. There is just a runaway executive with absolutely dubious health issues, dubious health profile. And so this is a very dangerous moment in our history, and it's a dangerous moment because you have people who do not have the interests of anyone but themselves making these decisions to go in and steal the resources of other nations, to go in and murder people to get to those. And I want to just tell you a story because this is one that is close to my heart. My father-in-law first told me this story, and I later corroborated it with other people that were eyewitnesses on this day. In June 18th, 1954, the United States bombed Guatemala. Thousands of people were killed and hurt, and then the Marines invaded. Why? What did President Jacobo Arbenz do? What was his great crime? One, establish the first labor laws. Imagine actually having to be paid for your work. Imagine actually being given a day of rest for your work. Imagine not being allowed to be worked to death, basically. So first labor laws. Also, there was a large company called the United Fruit Company that had, through corruption, acquired huge swaths of land. And what President Arbenz did is said any private land that is fallow, agricultural land that is not being used, will go back to the people so that they may live, so that they may have subsistence agriculture. Largest shareholders was one of the Dulles brothers. And there are many books on John Foster Dulles and his brother and all of that. And just like now, just like Stephen Miller, insane, Marco Rubio, also insane, have the ear of this current autocrat, then they convinced the president that it was in the U.S. interest to take out a democratically elected president. And on that day, when word spread that the Marines had landed, my father-in-law, who at the time was probably 17, 18, ran to the presidential palace with thousands of young men, and they begged. They said to the authorities, to the president, give us weapons, allow us to defend our nation. And the president said, your blood will not be on my conscience. I will go into exile and pray that, Guatemala will have a better future. In any case, they stripped him, put him on a plane to exile in Mexico. And it was the officers, it was the military officers who said this will not stand. And they formed the first freedom fighters. La Primer Guerrilla de Guatemala was formed by military officers who were so incensed that their country would be invaded for the interests of this United Fruit Company. What happened? You have 30 years of absolute genocide. In fact, we now know that the Guatemalan genocide is the greatest genocide of our generation. 1 in 10 Guatemalans was killed, mostly men, women, and children. We're talking entire villages placed into the church and burned alive. Horrific cruelty and violence. And they were taught by the School of the Americas in Georgia. Many torture victims said that there was an American who was giving the orders in these torture chambers. Does this sound familiar? And they eventually brought in Mossad. So what I'm saying is, Here is a list of all the countries that the U.S. has invaded just in this hemisphere for its economic interests. No good can come of the invasion of another country for the economic interests of a few. No good can come of it for the United States or for the people of the United States. And we need to stand together and demand justice. Demand justice for the Venezuelan people. Demand justice for our people that are being hunted. Demand justice for every man, woman, child that is being abused in North America at this moment. There is no greater power than the power of the people united. And that's what we need right now. We need unity. We need unity and understanding that we are either a country or community of laws or we are lawless. We either want to live in a world of peace, stability, and as the great first indigenous president of Mexico said, Benito Juárez, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. What does that mean? It means that when you respect others, you can have peace. If you don't respect anyone else, you will never have peace. And that's at any level, individual, family, community, whatever grouping you'd like. And right now, the absolute tyranny with which decisions are being made will have consequences for generations. And really, I don't usually do this, but I have to give a lot of credit to the head of Spain who has canceled all contracts with the U.S. and say we want nothing to do with someone who behaves this way. One of the few. Europe is coming together and said, you touch, for example, Greenland, NATO is dead. What does that mean? That means that there is no international compact of military cooperation. Nobody wants to play with the U.S. It is beyond anything we've ever seen in our lifetimes, and our children will be paying the price, not just for the trillions of dollars that are being wasted through graft and corruption, through the terrible, terrible things that the military is doing in our name and with our tax dollars, and with absolutely no oversight with regard to the three branches of government and the balance of power. So we need to really ensure that our congressional members are doing what they need to do. They need to have investigations, and they need to bring people before them, and they need to bring charges. And these things need to be cleaned up, and we need to get out and vote this year. We all know what's coming. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I pray that we will see better days soon. I have, over the years that these videos have been prepared, I've tried to share books about Latin America. I feel like there's a whole, there's a void, there's not an area where you can discuss intellectual Latin American ideas in English. In Spanish, there's lots, but I want this to be a place where you get to know books that really give you amazing insight into the history, the economics, why are we where we are today in different countries in this hemisphere. And so for my favorite part of the video, the book recommendations, I have several books for you today. The first book is Blitzer's book, Everyone Who Is Gone Is Here, and it talks about this constant policy of destabilization, the need to intervene, the need for violence, and just a terrible, terrible mistreatment of Latin America by North America. And so this book is insightful. It's written by someone who obviously has inside sources, and so recommend it if you want an overview of why the North American governments insist on behaving in this manner. The second is exactly what the title says, McPherson's A Short History of U.S. Intervention in Latin America and the Caribbean. Doesn't stop. It's been going on for over 100 years, but it needs to stop. It really does. So this book will give you an overview of all the interventions. Lefebvre's Inevitable Revolutions says what we all know, that the U.S. is constant violence, constant meddling, constant need to try and just destabilize and suppress progressive ideas. People want to live better. People want to live in dignity. Why is that wrong? that it produces the opposite. It produces more violence. It produces more suppression. It produces everything that forces people to leave their homes. So you see the circle? The U.S. is a contributor to the violence and destabilization of the countries from which people then walk north to try and just survive. Do you see the hypocrisy of the positions here? And of course, the classic work by Eduardo Galeano, Open Veins of Latin America, it just lays it all out. It lays it all out, how it has been a history of conquest, colonialism, extraction, and just mistreatment of our countries and the countries where our families come from. And so, you know, it's important to focus on one date, 2040. In 2040, melanin-enhanced people in North America will become the majority. What does that mean? It means all of the things we're seeing are things from fear, because demographics is destiny. And we are going to be such a better majority. Why? Because we worship our children, right? We care for our elders. We are the moral fiber of our communities. There's no such thing as family values like the Latino family. No one goes hungry. There's always a place for, as there's a saying in Spanish, where 5 eat, 6 will eat. We are inclusive. We come in a rainbow of colors, and we love life. We are the happiest people, literally, in the world. So we are going to be such a good majority, and I want to end on that note. Just get ready. Envision a world together. Let's envision a world where Latinas and Latinos are the majority, and we insist that there be all the services for everyone who needs them, and we get rid of half of all of the military bases in the world to pay for free education, healthcare for everyone, all of the basic needs that we all should have to live a life of dignity. And so with that, I thank you for coming to the end of this video, and dream a world, as the wonderful Langston Hughes said. Let's dream a world. Thank you. Con mucho cariño, mucho salud, mucho amor. Gracias.